My bro, my mate and I spent a night camping on top of a mountain that turned out to be seriously cursed by Maori spirits. I will be precise with my information, events, and facts, but will try not to sacrifice the telling of the story in doing so. As such, I reckon this will be a longer one. I will tell most of the narrative in green text, but there is a point in the events where things get way too disjointed for green text. I have tried, but I cannot make it work. Other than that, I will provide some basic information here at the beginning and again at the end, and other than that, I will try not to break the green text. Basic information. This story took place in the summer of 2018 here in New Zealand. The mountain in question is Mount Pohaturoa, located on the opposite bank of the Waikato River from State Highway 30, just outside of the hydro dam town called Adiamuri. If you are a Kiwi and you have ever driven south from Tokoroa towards the western access road around Lake Taupo, you will have seen this mountain. I am a born and bred New Zealander and have spent most of my life outside. This was my first and only outwardly spooky experience I have had, but it opened my eyes up to so many things that I would have unconsciously ignored before this night. Maori to this day act as if there are spirits and cursed/sacred places that you just should not fuck with, and nowadays, I'm inclined to think that they are right. This is the story of what happened when I spent a night in one of these places. It was December 2018, around the time it happened. I suggest to my bro that we do some camping before Christmas, when we won't be able to get away. He agrees, and reckons that we should check out Mount Pohaturoa, which we are both familiar with as a backdrop on car rides, but have never actually explored. It's settled, and we will take my mate too, who was only just getting into out, and to be honest, after this ordeal, I'm surprised he's still into going out. Bro does some research. Turns out that the mountain is on land belonging to the local Maori tribe, and is being leased out for forestry, so we will need to be somewhat stealthy about getting in. He also finds on an old forum information that there was one time a trail that went up onto the peak, which is really lucky, cause this mountain is sheer buttress on all sides around the flat peak. Pick related, it's the old map of the place. We set out one morning with very basic gear, tarps, mats, cookers, food, and machetes for cutting through the blackberries that will inevitably be choking the undergrowth of the pines growing on the lower slopes. We drive south for a few hours. Everyone is excited at the prospect of exploring a potentially lost trail in the anticipated view from the top of the mountain down the Waikato River Valley and towards the inland volcanic plateau. We come into the river valley and see Pohaturoa looming out of the middle of the valley floor, looking like something out of an old western. I have to drive around for a bit to find a safe place to park Bro's Outback out of sight. Fortunately, there is no logging machinery around, so we park up at a logging trail at the foot of the mountain. We leave the Outback and orient ourselves. Bro has a Garmin watch or some shit with a map and is orienting it with the map I posted to try to get us close to the old trail. Fucked if I know how all of that works. The tree line is a wall of mature radiata pine and thick undergrowth. Inside is very dark, and it is very clear that no one goes in here anymore. Above the trees, we can see the sheer cliffs of the rock block that was the core of the mountain before it all eroded away, but we can see that there is a kind of gully in the side that we are facing, which looks to be the only way up to the summit. Bro puts us on a bearing, and I take point to cut a path through the blackberry. It's hot work, but as the slope builds, the undergrowth drops off, but we are now walking up a 45-degree slope, thick with slippery pine needles. My mate finds it weird that there are no birds around. We just put it down to the forest being too monocultural. Still kinda strange though. The pines are so old and so close together that we cannot see ahead to the cliffs, and we can hardly see the sky. There is no sign of the old trail either. I stop to ask Bro if we are on the right bearing. He says, my watch has not updated our position in the last couple 100 meters. I don't know if it's because the trees are too thick or what. Just keep going uphill. So we do so, and eventually run almost straight into a sheer cliff face with no sign of the trail or any way up. I reckon we drifted to the left and cut back into the thick of the pines to loop right. The slope is so steep by this point that we are having to reach up and get a hold of pine trunks and branches to pull ourselves up. We realize that if this forest was meant to be harvested, they've done a piss poor job of managing it. This would not be the first time forestry land was left to go to shit because the Maori tribe owning the land flipped the table. I reach out for a root to hold onto, and when it comes away from the pine needles, I realize it's not a root, but an old wooden plank. I can make out another one just above me. I inform the boys that we have found the trail. We follow the now constant trail of old retaining boards and find the pines growing thinner as we go higher. We come out to a scrubby little clearing at the base of a very steep vertical gully in the cliff faces and see the remains of old wooden stairs set into the rock. We are thrilled that we found the way up, and we start to climb. The way up is very steep and at times very precarious. It's probably way too dangerous to be trusting a worn-out, decades-old stair, but we are too exhilarated to be above the trees. After a bit of climbing, we emerge out onto the southern end of the flat summit, mostly native scrub grass, tall enough that you can't see over it into the interior, but we just spend a few minutes enjoying the view. From up here, we have total command of the valley, can see the Waikato River flowing from past the foot of Pohaturoa out along the valley towards the very, very distant Ruapehu, still gleaming with a little bit of snow. It was and still is one of the best views I've ever experienced. I decide to check out the interior and find a campsite. We are hacking our way through the long grass when we realize we are not alone anymore, but surrounded by fantails. These cool little birds are pretty common anywhere in New Zealand where there is native bush. They will hang around people and generally be curious, but these ones were being even more so. We put it down to the fact that they must have not seen people before. We take care when swinging machetes so as to not hit our little bros. The ground we are walking over is cratered every now and again by pits about 2 meters by 2 meters. I begin to wonder if maybe there are caves or sinkholes up here, so I tell everyone to be careful and not to step into the holes. We are getting close to the center of the summit when Bro calls out that he can see a group of cabbage trees growing ahead of us. These kinds of trees naturally grow in swampy soil, which means that there must be some kind of spring up here. I go in to check it out, but come upon something we did not expect. There is a square post that had been hammered into the earth at the head of a very large pit. It was painted white and marked with a black B, and looked weathered but reasonably newish. At the bottom of a small dip nearby was a clear but marshy pool of water. What the fuck? Bro and mate gather around and try to work out what we are looking at. My mate, a geology student, says maybe it was from a soil survey or something. When I hear this, I am reminded of a field trip me and my history class went on to an excavation. At the time I was studying history at Victoria University. Nah bruh, this is from an excavation. It then dawns on me, the pits. Neither of you stepped in any of those pits, right? Bro and mate say no and ask why. 'Cause they're probably old Maori sites or something. Now, when I said this, it was purely out of scholarly concern for disrupting a dig site. However, it did occur to me that it was odd that a site such as this was never signposted to prevent entry, or was clearly abandoned a while ago. I guess that like the forestry management, the tribe probably flipped their shit because of something and called the dig off. Figure that the ancient Maori must have used this place as a fortress back in the day. God knows with the source of fresh water, the place is perfect for it. And this entire time, we have about 20 or so fantails following us. We head back to the outer edge of the summit to find a campsite. We run into another dig marker marked E and figure that there must be dozens of dig sites around here. Find a great spot to camp at the edge of the cliff top with a view down the valley. We clear out the scrub and pitch camp. It is mid-afternoon by now, but we are all fairly hot and knackered, so we pitch our tarps and take off our shoes and relax. The fantails get more and more curious by this activity and perch on the tarp strings and even sit in our boots to enjoy the warmth. At this time, I'm starting to get a bit uneasy about staying up here, now knowing that this place is a historic site. The Maori tribe are notoriously possessive with their land, and if someone sees our car and figures that we are out here, we might walk out of here in the morning to get jumped, especially because the nearby town is noted for gang activity. On One News tonight, a trio of far-right terrorists are apprehended by peaceful tribe members after desecrating tapu site. Small disclosure, tapu is a concept in Maori culture that is kind of hard to put a finger on. Basically, all things have mana, a kind of spiritual honor/prestige. Mana can be gained in honorable actions or taken away through shame. If something has a really powerful mana, then it is tapu, and to degrade the tapu means that you can make it lose mana, which will incur utu, or a vengeance to rebalance the scales. This can happen on a human scale, and also on a cosmic scale. My fear was that the tribe would perceive that we desecrated the tapu of the site, and would incur utu on us. I gave no thought to there being an utu of the other kind. I kept my reservations to myself, as I had no intention of ruining the time for bro and mate with my paranoia. Plus, having a machete will make anyone feel gangsta. We make dinner early to not interrupt the sunset, which looks like when it comes out will be something special. Fuck yeah, roast chicken wraps. The sun begins to go down in the west, touching the hills on the side of the valley that we are facing, and the sky immediately begins to go a very deep shade of red. And I don't mean normal sunset red. This was like someone painted the sky with red watercolors. It was deep and kind of smoky. Bro, I don't think the Southern Lights came this far north. He theorizes that maybe there was a big bushfire somewhere west. At this point, the sun is bisected by the hilltops, and in the redness of the sky, wrens of deep black are opening up to the night beyond. That was the last moment of cognizance I have of that night. What I am about to relate from here until I was standing back at the foot of the mountain the next morning, I can only remember as if they were out-of-body experiences, or as if they were vivid dreams. I tried green texting these bits, but it was way too confusing. Below is what I remember. I will try not to color it too much with any of my reflections, and just tell it as the images presented themselves. From that moment, I was looking out over the cliff at the sunset. The next, I was looking down at myself from above. I remember seeing myself, my bro, and mate, all sitting still with very stern expressions as we watched the sky. We were lit up red and gold with the light, and all over us were perched the fantails, more than there had ever been before, and all of them still and quiet, watching the sky just like we were. The scene then went dark as the sun vanished, and everything was cast in the deep red of the sky. Next, I was back in the perspective of my own body, but I do not recall being lucid in it, as it was like I was a passenger rather than driving. I have to emphasize how abstract and dreamy this all felt. Things like perspective and geography were being warped for the sake of the images I was seeing. I was again looking up at the sky, and the black wrens that we had seen before were growing and merging until it split the sky, which exactly mirrored the black shape of the river below us. Out of that black river in the sky, figures began to emerge, black silhouettes cast onto the red sky. They came out of the river and were at the banks. Now the perspective shifted, and it's like I was in the first-person perspective of one of those people down on the river. We were on the banks looking up at Pohaturoa, pulling in canoes to the banks. The people looked like Maori, but they did not have facial tattoos, and their hair was dark red. I, or the body whose eyes I was seeing through, looked to where a large canoe was being pulled in, and a tall man who I knew was the chief of our people stepped out onto the bank and turned to a woman. She was Maori. She had a tomoko on her chin and greenstone earrings, and was beautiful in a way that I have not seen a woman look like in the real world. The chief helped his wife from the canoe. The whole thing was very dignified. Then I was again looking at the sky, and on the river were two groups of figures fighting. Next, I was again looking through that same figure's eyes. I do not know how I know it was the same man. I could smell blood. There had been a battle on the river with people who were clearly Maori, and while the Maori had been defeated, the tribe had also lost men. I was in a group of the red-headed tribesmen assembled at the house of the chief. They were angry and gesturing to his Maori wife, who the chief then relented and turned on. Then the memory shifted to being back looking at the sky. Now above the image of the river is the silhouette of Mount Pohaturoa looking like a tombstone. And then from the peripheries of the horizon, blackness began to seep in the shapes of hundreds of men with spears, and the smoky red sky surrounding the mountain was then alive like it was on fire. There was the sensation that everything was throbbing with the beat of drums. Once again, in the perspective of the tribesmen, the drumming was as loud as if it was behind me, and I was climbing that steep gully up the side of the mountain, just like I had before. Only now my arms were brown, and I was surrounded by other fleeing people, all scrambling up the mountainside as something chased us. There was a heavy smell of smoke. Even recalling that memory, my heart speeds up a bit. When I saw the sky again, it was as if the colors had been switched. The sky was black, and the river was red. There was no other image. When I was looking again through the eyes of the tribesmen, it was totally dark, and my nose and mouth were filled with stagnant earth. But I could feel my hands breaking out into the air. There was a distinct feeling that there was something coming up the mountain, that it would be there soon. I was then looking down at myself as if from above again. Only now the night was dark. There was no light but from the moon and stars. Me, bro, and mate were all still sat there as still as before, but the fantail that sat on us were not. They were squeaking and shaking their tails where they stood, staring behind us into the long grass. Through the tribesmen's eyes, I could only smell the scent of decay. I looked through the long grass to the edge of the summit and saw myself, bro, and mate all sat as we were before, covered in fantails. The sensation that something was coming up the mountain was stronger than ever, and then I was overcome by a certainty that whatever it was had arrived on the summit. Looking down on the three of us again, the grasses to our backs were thrashing like several large crawling things were moving around the clearing of our camp, but every time they came close, the fantails, now flashing all around us, would dart towards the scrub, and whatever was in there would turn back for a moment. Much like how I felt for the tribesmen that something had arrived on the summit, I now felt that same sensation as I looked down on our bodies. There was something coming this way, that had come up the mountain to find us. And then I was back in my body. I was walking behind my bro, my hand clenched on the shoulder of his shirt, and I could feel mates on mine, like kids, trying not to get lost in the dark. We were walking through the scrub, one behind the other in darkness, surrounded still by fantails, and the sound of crashing in the scrub all around us. My head was bent, and I had the very strong impulse in my head that I must not look at the faces of whatever was in the scrub. That moment flashed to the next, and we were no longer on the summit, but on the lower slope of Pohaturoa, descending just as we had before, with hands on shoulders, in the same dream haze. Only now, the night was quiet, and though the pines made the darkness near absolute, my bro walked on like he knew exactly where to go, and I could still feel the fantails perched on me, though they were now quiet. Around this time, awareness seemed to be returning a bit to us. Bro mutters, nearly out. I mutter something to mate, but hear nothing. I reach my free hand across my body to tap mate's hand, only to freeze when I touch it. My fingers met with something that feels smooth and bony. I went to turn around when that impulse I felt not to look before came back over me, only now it was soothing, as if explaining to a frightened child. One of the bony fingers at my shoulder unfurls and strokes my still frozen hand, and I became calm. A voice seemed to say in that movement, "Don't worry, your friend is safe. He is just here behind me." And the next thing I recall, it was morning, and all three of us stood in a row, facing away from the tree line next to bro's car, with all of our gear stacked neatly beside it. This is my first real feeling memory I have, where it actually feels like I was back in full command of myself. We all stare at each other for a minute, unable to remember how we got there. My mate is there, and for some reason, that fills me with relief. We ask each other what the last thing that we remember is. All can only recall up to the sunset. Weirdly, on autopilot, we pack our things into the car. My mate keeps staring back into the tree line. I don't even want to look at it. On the ride home, barely saying a word to each other, we are in a state of strange mental fatigue. We have to take turns driving, cause bro almost falls asleep. Only in the ensuing weeks do the memories begin to return to me. I tried to talk to bro about it, but he keeps saying he can't remember anything. I don't know if this is true, or if he does not want to admit it, or if maybe he saw something worse than I did, but my mate is open with his returning memories. He had almost exactly the same experience as me. We put the pieces together over a few weeks. Then, while we drink beers in my shed on Christmas Eve, he says, "Do you remember her?" "What do you mean?" "The one who got us off the mountain. She was a tall woman, wrapped in a feather cloak with greenstone earrings. She led me by the hand and was holding on to you." After another beer, I realized it must have been the chieftainess from the dream. Fuck man, why do you get the undead Maori princess waifu? I have done a lot of research about Mount Pohaturoa and the local area since then, and I think I have roughly put together what we experienced. I will post my hypothesis in a bit. Now I gotta take a break because this took way longer than I thought it would. I didn't realize how damn big this would be until uploading it from the Word doc. Apologies for that, but out is slow as fuck anyway, so who gives a fuck? Bravo if you read the whole thing. So, I did a bunch of research into the area after the incident, and turns out that the area around Pohaturoa was settled by the first wave of Polynesian settlers in the 1400s. For those who do not know, the early Polynesians in NZ at the time were nomadic, as they hunted the large native bird fauna that had evolved here like moa. The moa hunter cultures were defined by the fact that they were nomads, were far less material than later Maori culture, and they were far less violent. They had no reason to be, with so many resources. When the moa began to die out, the new waves of Polynesian settlers brought cultivated crops with them, and started creating larger settled communities. With this settlement came competition for arable land and a more warlike culture. I believe that the red-haired people I saw through the eyes of were the Moa hunter tribe of the area, and that the Maori who came in were newcomers looking to gain influence in that area through a marriage of a chief's daughter to the chief of the Moa hunter tribe. And to back it up, I have the iwi's oral history that explains exactly that. This article goes into the local history and lines up with what I saw. Fletcher says they could barely be called a tribe to start with, more like a collection of scattered families. They arrived in the area around 1400 and were known as the people of the Pumice Lands. Over the next 200 years, they lived in the area alongside the Ngāti Hotu and the Ngāti Ruakapiri. As with European monarchs, the Hapu arranged a strategic alliance, marrying a chieftainess to a man of the Kahupungapunga for the sake of peace and access to the region's natural wealth. But the arrangement, it is said, turned sour. This is where shit gets really fucked up. The Maori woman that I saw was obviously blamed for the attack by the Moa hunters from what I had seen, and I figured she must have been killed. But the way they did it was so horrible that it makes me sick and angry. According to the legend, people here saw her as imposing their mana on them. They could see a loss of the area with more people coming in. They murdered her and made it look like an accident. But the woman, most commonly thought to be named Kiraukore, had a slave. He discovered Kahupungapunga's treachery and carried the news back to Kawhia. The Rokawa Hapus were furious and, that same day, gathered together a war party, 500 strong. The warriors moved across the land, conquering several pa as they went. Finally, they met the Kahupungapunga in a battle called Torianuku. It does not say how she died, but there is a bit later on that stirred my memory. The pursuers crossed the stream to Pohaturoa. Each party fought valiantly. The Ngāti Wairangi were several times repulsed, but in the end, they drove back the others and captured their great Toa fighting chief, Hikarupe. The great stones on which the bodies were cooked can still be seen. The rock in question is pick-related. It has many legends to its name, but one is that it was used to cook alive a Maori princess. When I touched her hand, all of the skin on her had been stripped away, and her bones were shiny, like they had been boiled. Why they boiled her alive instead of outright killing her, I do not know, but as far as I care, those motherfuckers got what they deserved for what they did to her. I think that the things that were stalking us in the grass were the spirits of the Moa hunters, and the spirit of the princess had so much mana that they were afraid of her when she let us out. Regarding the fantails, they are held by Maori to be bodies that dead spirits can inhabit. I think they were the dead Maori spirits protecting us. Last post, cause it is late, and this is too long anyway. But since then, I see fantails a lot more often, and in places I would not expect. I live in an urban area, and one morning, a fantail flew into my living room, hovered in front of me, and chirped, and then flew straight out. Fantails inside houses are considered seriously bad juju, and that afternoon, I heard that my grandfather had died the following night. I like to think that it was him saying farewell. That's it really, unless there are questions. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Be me. I just turned 22 years old. I am living in Christchurch, NZ. I decided to go hunting for fossils at a new spot. My GF, now my ex, is not interested in that type of thing particularly, but is keen to come with me just for the adventure. I jump into my GF's 4x4 and head about 2 hours out of the city, onto desolate logging land. Redwoods are equivalent as far as I can see on both sides of the narrow dirt road. I am following the map on my phone until we finally reach the location. I park the car on the roadside. It's a sunny day. It's still coldish, being South Island. Fuck yeah, I am excited to get digging. My GF says she's gonna stay in the car, as I am only scouting the rock formations to see if we are in the right area. I go over the embankment and out of sight of the car. I find some exposed rocks. We are finally in business. I am struck with this sudden, nearly overwhelming sense of sadness. I start to feel fear. Just to preface, I am a happy guy and this is not something that happens often. I get the sense that I am not alone. I cannot focus on the job at hand, as I am deeply saddened for some reason. I am not sure why, but I know that the feeling is external, as if it belongs to someone else. I decide to head back to the car. I approach the ute. My GF is looking away. She is dead staring into the forest on the opposite side of the road to where I was. She does not look away from the tree line the entire time I am walking up to her. The windows are down, and there is little to no wind. I finally get to the car. The feeling of sadness has turned nearly to complete anguish at this point. I look over the roof of the car as I think I can see some movement in the forest, just faint. I am in complete disbelief. The entire tree line in maybe a 5-meter area is blurry and moving like a heat wave coming off of a tar road on an extremely hot day. I shit you not, the rest of the bush on either side is perfectly clear and swaying in the light breeze. I stare at this patch of almost clear mist that does not move in the wind. It just hovers there, maybe a meter into the trees. I am staring at this thing intently, and it disappears. Not dissipates. I am saying it just vanishes. The tree line in the forest look as they should in less than a second. The emotional wave of anguish that I was feeling disappears. I just kind of feel empty and a little in shock. I open up the car door. My GF nearly fills her pants. She is in tears and terrified. She tells me that she saw it too. She begs me to just get in the car so that she can drive far, far away. She decides to never come fossil hunting with me, ever again.